And suddenly, one Sunday morning, my boss shows up at my residence. Now, some of you are probably from government, and others you can imagine what it would be like if, say, the CEO of your company or your top supervisor gave you a phone call on a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, and you answered the phone, somewhat sleepy, and he said, "Hey, Eric, what are you doing right now?" And the answer, of course, is, "Well, I was sleeping, but I'm wide awake now, sir." And he says, "Well, I'd like to talk to you if you have a moment." And you say, of course, "Okay, give me a little bit, I'll get dressed and I'll come in." "No, don't worry about it, I'm parked outside." That's where the butterflies start, right? Because you think you're in trouble. Why would your supervisor come to your house and then not want to come inside? Now, when you did what I used to do, working these very, very secure, sensitive, undercover operations, you think someone sold me out, someone gave me name, one of my targets got wind of me and sold me as a spy or something like that to get me in trouble, and SWAT will be waiting, separate guy from wife, remove them. So when I walked out, I felt like there was a target on my head. Of course, you look up, that's where they're normally waiting, and there was nothing. And so I see my boss, my supervisor, just sitting in his car with a grin on his face. I thought, okay, this is just too weird. This is surreal, and maybe I'm still dreaming. I walk out and get in the car, and he says to me, without saying anything else, "Have you ever heard of Robert Hansen?" Well, I hadn't. He knew I hadn't, because, of course, it was it was at the time the most critical and sensitive case we were working. And I said, "No." He said, "Get in." So I sit in the car with him, and he says, "We're going to conduct an espionage investigation, and we want you to work undercover on it." I said, "Well, isn't that what I do anyway, all the time?" He said, "No, not following him in a car, not following him when he goes into Kmart or whatever, but actually in the office with him. We're going to create a mousetrap. We're going to call it the Information Assurance Division. We're going to put him in charge, and you're going to be his employee. We're going to task you to him." Why do people try to break into houses? Why do people try to take advantage of people? Well, let's think a little bit about the Hansen case again. What was he doing? Well, way back in the day, Robert Hansen was assigned to the Manhattan field office in New York City. He was young, and he was recently married and had a bunch of kids, and I honestly believe that he decided he needed to make a buck. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of people start to spy. And honestly, you really want spies to do it for money rather than things like ideology, because that's a lot harder to catch. And here he decided to spy for money, and he came up with a plan. He decided the way that he was going to do it was volunteer to a intelligence officer he knew. And the interesting thing is, when he volunteered to this intelligence officer, that was his first act of spying. And by volunteering, I mean that he is clandestinely sending a message to that person to say that I have access to information that you want to buy, and let's work out a way that I can get you that, and you can pay me. Now, that intelligence officer had no idea we knew he was an I.O. And the problem there is that now he knows, and us following him is a little bit more difficult, because now he's going to be very careful. And of course, we want him to lead us to the other Robert Hansens. And then from there, of course, they arrange ways to share this information, to make drops. Back in the day, remember this is 22 years, he was photocopying things and putting them in trash bags and taping them up with duct tape and then burying them in the ground somewhere so that someone could come and dig them up later and leave large sums of cash under different places for him. And in fact, he even said in one of his letters, and you can get these all online, by the way, if you read the affidavit, he even said, $50,000 is too much. Never leave me a drop that's more than $10,000. I couldn't possibly spend it. You're going to get me caught. So imagine someone who's dropping some of the most damaging secrets ever and is telling them, pay me less because I don't want to get caught. And that's why he was smart. Robert Hansen was something of a very quiet, reserved, and for those who I've talked to who knew him prior to the case, before my involvement with him, something of a jerk. And I don't use that term lightly. People did not like him. He didn't talk to them, and when he did, he was rather abrupt. Now, if you're a spy, this makes sense, right? You don't want to be the gregarious, bouncing around type person. You want to be the quiet, reserved person that doesn't say things, because when you say things, you might trip up and give information that is going to get you caught, which, by the way, was my job. Talk to him. It was the most important thing that I did talk to him. Get him to talk, get him to open up, and get him to tell you things that are going to help us get on his trail, confirm he's the spy that we want, and then catch him. How did we learn about Hansen? This wasn't just me who somehow magically figured everything out. He was given up by a source from Russia. There was a folder of information that the FBI paid quite a deal for. And in that, it had some of the letters that he had written under a pseudonym, in addition to a partial fingerprint and a partial voice recognition. So he had a tape that had a call that he had made to the Russian handler at one point, which was something of a mistake. And of course, he bet on the wrong horse. When the KGB fell apart, they didn't want to just beat their swords into plowshares and go work in fields. Instead, what they decided to do was raid file cabinets and sell it to whoever was the biggest buyer. And one of them was the FBI, and that put us on Hansen as a possible target. And those of you that are in investigations know that this is a target, and when you start thinking, I'm going to catch him, you can find ways to make him a criminal. So you have to think of these things as benefit of doubt, giving them all the benefit of the doubt of whether they're innocent or not. And here they were more likely than not that this was the spy we were looking for, but we weren't sure, and we really still thought it was in the CIA, so we were going to create the situation where we could catch him. And that's where I came in. So we knew he might be the spy. We weren't sure he was the spy, and part of my job was to figure out whether he is the spy.